Welcome to Midnight Chapel. Tonight, some of the oldest stories of the Christian faith will remind you that your racing thoughts are not yours to carry, and that you are held while you sleep. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. It is quietly comforting to know who else is awake tonight. And if stories like these help you rest at night, it would mean a lot if you subscribe. There is a story from the Gospels about a boat crossing a lake at night. The day had been long and full of voices. When evening came, the teacher asked to go across to the other side, and so they went. The boat was small, the water was dark and wide. The men aboard were fishermen, and they knew this lake the way you know the hallway of your own house. They had crossed it 100 times. They knew where the wind came from, and they knew where it would drop them. Then the wind rose. It came down over the hills the way it sometimes does on that lake, sudden and cold, and the water lifted. Waves came over the sides. The boat began to fill, and the men who knew that water began to be afraid. Notice what fear does to the mind. It does not only frighten, it speeds everything up. Each man on that boat began to think at once, and their thoughts ran faster than the wind. What if the boat goes down? What if we do not reach the shore? Someone must bail. Someone must hold the sail. Someone must stay awake and keep watch, or all of this is lost. That is a familiar feeling. You have had that feeling in a bed in the dark, with no lake anywhere near you. And in the back of the boat, on a cushion, the teacher was asleep. Let that sit for a moment. Not resting, not thinking quietly with his eyes closed, asleep. The water was coming in over the sides and he was asleep on a cushion in the stern. Think about how the wind sounds on open water. It does not howl. That is a house sound. On a lake, it is a low, continuous pressure, felt more than heard, with the slap of water underneath it. It is oddly not so far from the sound of a fan in a bedroom. The same sound frightens one man and puts another to sleep. The sound is not the thing. The men woke him. They said, "Do you not care that we are going down?" It was not a polite question. It was the question of people who have been holding everything together for hours and have run out of hands. The waves on that lake are short and steep. It is not open sea. The water piles up quickly and comes over the sides in slaps rather than in one great wall. That is worse in some ways. It is relentless rather than enormous. Most of what wears people down is like that. Not one enormous thing. A great many small slaps over the side. He stood up. He spoke to the wind. He stood up. He spoke to the wind and to the water, and the wind sat down like a dog that has been called. The lake went flat. The night went quiet, and the men stood in a still boat on a still lake, wetter and more astonished than they had ever been. Now, here is the part of the story that matters tonight. The storm did not wake him. That is the detail. He did not sleep through it because he was unaware of it. He slept through it because the boat was already held. The water was not in charge of that night. It never had been. He knew what the wind did not know, and so he slept. Think about how long that crossing would have taken. Hours, probably. A small boat under sail on a wide lake at night, with the wind against them for part of it. Hours is a long time to be afraid. Fear is not built for hours. It is built for moments. And when it is asked to run for hours, it turns into something duller and heavier, which is what you are lying in now. That heaviness is not a character flaw. It is what a body does when an alarm has been running too long. The alarm can stop. Nothing has needed it for hours. There is a way of hearing this story that turns it into a demand. There is a way of hearing this story that turns it into a demand. Be like him. Have that kind of calm. Do better at trusting. That is not what tonight is for, and it is not what the story does. The story does something gentler than that. It puts a sleeping man in the middle of the worst hour of the night, and it lets you look at him. Because your mind is loud right now. Something is turning over and over, and it will not set itself down. Maybe it is money. Maybe it is a person who did not answer. Maybe it is a sentence you said this afternoon that you would like to take back and cannot. Maybe it is nothing you can name at all, which is somehow worse, because you cannot put down a weight you cannot find. And underneath all of it, there is one thought that is louder than the rest. Someone has to stay awake. That is the thought. That is the real one. If I stop thinking about this, no one is watching it. If I let go of the rope, the boat goes down. It does not. That is what the sleeping man in the stern is for. Think about the cushion for a moment. Somebody put it there. It was kept in the stern for whoever was steering, and on that night, it was under the head of a sleeping man. A small comfort in a working boat on a hard lake. The night you are in has small comforts in it too. They are not dramatic. A pillow, a blanket that has your own warmth in it now, a door that is closed. Let yourself rest on the small comforts. They are the ones that actually work. The large reassurances never land at this hour. The cushion does. The boat crossed the lake that night. The boat crossed the lake that night. It crossed it because of what held it, not because of who worried about it. The worrying added nothing. The men who stayed awake and bailed and calculated did not get the boat 1 inch closer to shore than the man asleep on the cushion. You are not the reason the night holds together. You never were. Consider how strange it must have looked. Water rising, men shouting, and one person breathing slowly in the back, the boat rocking him the way a hand rocks a cradle. The very thing that terrified them was rocking him to sleep. The wind was not gentler for him. It was the same wind. Notice that. The circumstances did not change to allow his rest. His rest came from somewhere the circumstances could not reach. There is an old way of saying it. Peace is not the absence of the storm. Peace is the presence of the one who is not worried by it. So let the storm be a storm. You do not have to make the lake flat before you are allowed to sleep. That has been the arrangement you were living under, and it is not a true arrangement. You have been telling yourself that once the problem is solved, once the message is answered, once the number works out, then you can rest. Then you can put your head down. But the water on that lake had not gone flat when he fell asleep. It went flat afterward. Rest came first. Rest is not the reward at the end of a settled mind. Rest is offered to you inside the unsettled one. Feel the shape of the boat under him. Wood, worn smooth, still warm from the day. A cushion in the stern, the kind kept for the man who steers. The smell of rope and fish and lake water. The sound of the hull knocking against the swell, over and over. A sound with no urgency in it at all, if you are not afraid. He was not afraid, so the sound was just a sound. And the men were afraid, so the same sound was the end of the world. The lake was one lake. There were 2 nights happening on that boat. You are lying in one of those 2 nights right now. The room is the same room either way. The hour is the same hour. What is different is only whether you believe someone else is holding it. Someone else is holding it. You do not have to bail. You do not have to keep watch. There is no rope in your hands tonight that anyone gave you. When they woke him, he did not scold them for being tired. He did not ask them to explain themselves. He stood up and quieted the thing that was frightening them. And then the night went on, and they crossed, and they reached the other side. And I imagine they slept the way you sleep, after fear has left the body all at once. That kind of sleep is heavy and sweet. Your arms get warm, your jaw lets go. That kind of sleep is waiting for you at the end of this story, and you do not have to earn it. Let the thought come that says, "But you do not understand my situation." Let it come. Do not argue with it. Arguing is another kind of staying awake. Just notice it, the way you would notice a lamp left on across the street. It is there. It is not asking you for anything. You can let it be there and still close your eyes. The boat is held, the lake is held, the night is held, and so are you. Think of the far shore for a moment. It was still there the whole time. It did not move. It did not become harder to reach because the wind came up. The place they were going to had already been chosen, and it waited, dark and low against the sky, the way land waits. They could not see it. That was all. Fear does not remove the shore. It only removes your view of it. And a shore you cannot see is still a shore. There is something you cannot see tonight. Tomorrow, probably. How it turns out. Whether the thing you are afraid of comes to anything at all. You have been staring into that dark and trying to make land appear by looking harder. Looking harder has never once made land appear. The men in that boat learned something they could not have learned in calm weather. They learned that the crossing was not theirs to complete. They had assumed it was. Every capable person assumes it is. That assumption is heavy. You have been carrying it so long that you no longer feel it as weight. You feel it as normal. Set it down for the length of one night. Just tonight. You can pick it up in the morning if you want it back. Peace is what is left when that assumption goes quiet. Not excitement, not certainty. Just the flat, ordinary peace of a person who is not required to steer. Notice how the body responds to that idea before the mind agrees with it. Something in the chest lowers. Something behind the eyes lets go. The body believes it first. The mind catches up while you sleep. The lake itself is worth staying with a little longer. It is a wide lake ringed by hills, and the wind comes down off those hills without warning. The fishermen there knew this. They planned around it the way you plan around traffic. At night, the water is black, and the far hills are blacker. There are no lights on the shore in that century. When the moon is behind cloud, there is nothing to steer by at all. Consider how much of your life you have steered in exactly that condition. You could not see the shore. You went anyway. You made the call, took the job, stayed in the difficult conversation, kept the household running, and you did it without a plan you could actually verify. And here you are, on the water still, not sunk. Notice that. You have crossed a great many dark lakes already. The mind at night forgets this completely. It treats tonight as the first night, as though nothing before it has ever been survived. Everything before it has been survived. That is the plain arithmetic of being alive at this hour. The men in that boat had crossed that same lake 100 times. It did not help them. Fear does not consult your history. So do not try to argue your way out of it with evidence. That is another kind of bailing. Just notice that the boat is still under you. There is peace in the boat, not in the weather, in the boat. The wood holds, the hull holds. The one asleep in the stern is not going to be woken by anything that happens between now and morning. Feel your own bed as that hull. Something under you, holding, that you did not build and do not have to maintain. You are held on the water. That is all that is being claimed tonight, and it is enough. There is a small thing worth saying before we move on. There is a small thing worth saying before we move on. The teacher slept on that boat because he had spent the day among crowds, and he was tired, and his body needed sleep, and he gave it sleep. He did not treat tiredness as a failure to be corrected. He treated it as a fact to be honored. Your tiredness is a fact. It is not a verdict on you. It is not laziness. It is the honest report of a body that has been carrying something for a long time. So the invitation is small, and it is only this: lie still. Let the boat rock you. The wind is not in charge. It never has been. That is grace. It does not wait until the water is calm. It comes to the stern of the boat while the water is still coming over the sides, and it puts a cushion under your head. You are held. You are held in a moving boat on a dark lake, and you are still held. Sleep is allowed here. There is a story the old teachers of the desert used to tell. In the years when men and women went out to live in small stone rooms at the edge of the world, to learn how to be quiet. A young man had gone out to one of those places. He had wanted this. He had imagined it for years, the silence and the clean hours, a life without noise in it. And what he found when he got there was noise. Not noise from outside. There was nothing outside. Sand and rock and a wind that came in the afternoon and left again. The noise was inside his own head, and it was worse there than it had ever been in the town. He sat in his small room, and his mind went everywhere. It went to his mother. It went to a man who had cheated him at a market 4 years earlier. It went to bread, and to whether there would be enough, and to a conversation he had planned to have and never had. It went to what he would say to the old teachers when they asked how his prayer was going. He tried to stop it. That made it louder. He tried to fight it. That made it faster. He tried to be ashamed of it, and the shame joined the crowd and started talking too. So one morning he walked across the sand to the room of an old man who had lived out there for 50 years, and he stood in the doorway, and he said, "My thoughts will not stop. I sit down to be still, and my mind runs. I have failed at the only thing I came here to do." The old man was doing something with his hands, weaving rope perhaps, or sorting lentils in a shallow bowl. He did not look up quickly. These old teachers never looked up quickly. He said, "Come and sit." The young man sat. The old man went on with his hands for a while, and let the silence be there, and did not rush to rescue him from it. Then the old man said this: "You cannot stop the birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from building a nest in your hair." That was all. He went back to his rope. The young man sat with it, and slowly the thing turned over in him. He had believed that a quiet mind meant a sky with no birds in it. He had been trying to empty the sky. He had been standing out there with his arms up, waving at a whole migration, exhausting himself, and calling the exhaustion prayer. But the sky is not the problem. The birds are not the problem. Birds fly. That is what a sky is for. Notice the mercy in that. The thought that arrives is not a failure. The thought that arrives is weather. It came from somewhere, and it is going somewhere, and it does not require your permission for either. What the old man was pointing at was smaller and kinder. You do not have to invite it down. You do not have to give it a place to settle. You do not have to build it a home in your hair and feed it and name it and let it live there through the winter. A bird passes over. You notice it. You let it pass. That is the whole practice. and it is far easier than what the young man had been doing. Consider what he had been doing instead. A thought about the market 4 years ago would come, and he would grab it. He would hold it up and turn it around. He would replay it. He would compose the sentence he should have said. He would imagine the man's face when he heard it. He would feel his own heart go faster. And then he would notice his heart going faster and be discouraged with himself. And that discouragement was another bird, and he would grab that one too. By noon there was a whole nest, and it was not the birds who built it. He had built it, patiently, with both hands. You know this nest. It is midnight, and you know exactly what I am describing. There is a thought you have picked up 9 times tonight. Each time you set it down, and each time you reach back for it. Not because it is helping, it is not helping. You reach for it because the reaching feels like doing something, and doing something feels safer than lying still. So the old man's word is for you as much as for the young one in the doorway. Let it fly over. You do not have to resolve it before morning. You do not have to have an answer ready. Nothing tonight is being decided by whether you think about it one more time. Feel how much lighter that is than the alternative. You have been trying to have no thoughts, which is impossible, and failing at an impossible thing all night, and calling the failure your own fault. That was never the assignment. The old teachers were not asking for an empty mind. They knew there is no such thing on this side of the ground. They were asking for a loose grip, that is all. A hand that opens. There is a version of this that is even gentler. Picture yourself lying in the dark, and picture the thoughts coming in over the edge of the room, one at a time, unhurried, the way birds come in low over a field at dusk. You do not have to shoot at them. You do not even have to look at them for long. You watch one cross the ceiling and go out the other side, then another, then a gap of nothing at all, and then another one. And somewhere in that rhythm, without your arranging it, the gaps get longer. That is how sleep actually comes, not by winning, by losing interest. There is one more thing in the old man's answer, and it is easy to walk past. He did not say the birds were wrong. He did not say they were dangerous. He did not tell the young man to be different than he was. He gave him a small physical picture, hair, a nest, something a person can see. The old teachers did that on purpose. They knew that a tired mind cannot follow an argument. It can follow a picture. So they handed out pictures the way you would hand bread to someone who has been walking all day. Take the picture with you into sleep. You do not need the rest of the teaching. Picture the sky over that stone room. It was enormous out there. The desert sky at night comes all the way down to the ground on every side, and the stars in it are thick and close and old. The young man used to go out and stand under it, and on the good nights, the ones he remembered later, he would forget to be at war with himself for a while, and just stand there under all that quiet. Nothing was solved on those nights. The market was still 4 years behind him. His mother was still far away. Bread was still a question. But there was peace in the standing. Peace did not come because the questions were answered. It came because, for a few minutes, he stopped holding them. That is available in a bed as easily as under a desert sky. You do not have to go anywhere. You do not have to become quiet first. You only have to loosen the fingers. One more thing about the desert before we let it go. Those small stone rooms were not comfortable. Let us not make them romantic. A mat, a jar, a shelf, a door that did not fit well, heat in the day, and real cold at night. And into that room every day came a full human mind. That is the thing people miss about those old teachers. They did not go out there and find silence. They went out there and found themselves at close range with nothing to distract them. The desert did not quiet them, it amplified them. Which is exactly what a dark bedroom does at 1 a.m. You are in a version of that stone room right now. Nothing to look at, nothing to do. Just you and the full volume of your own head. Notice that this is not a punishment. It is only what happens when the distractions stop. All day there were things to look at. Now there are none, and everything that was cued behind the noise has stepped forward to be heard. That is not a crisis. It is a backlog. And a backlog does not have to be processed tonight. The old teachers found something in that room that people have wanted ever since, and it was not a technique for emptying the mind. It was a way of being on good terms with a mind that would not empty. They stopped treating themselves as a problem. There is peace in that, and it is available immediately, without any practice at all. You are not a problem lying in a bed. You are a tired person with a busy head, which is the most ordinary thing in the world. The young man stayed in that place for many years. The young man stayed in that place for many years, and it is said that he became an old teacher himself, and that when the young ones came to his door and said, "My thoughts will not stop," he would keep his hands busy for a while before answering. Then he would tell them about the birds. He never told them that his own sky had emptied. It had not. He simply stopped calling the sky a problem. Notice that this is the same peace the sleeping man had in the boat. The storm was not removed. The birds were not removed. What changed was the belief that they had to be. You do not have to have a still mind to have a still body. Those are two different rooms, and you are allowed to lie down in the second one while the first one is still busy. Your body can rest right now. Your shoulders can come down away from your ears. Your hands can stop being ready. Your jaw can unclench, and your breath can get slower and lower in your chest. And all of that can happen while a bird is crossing the ceiling. Let it cross. That is grace. It does not require a quiet mind. It only requires an open hand. You are held. The sky above you is full of birds, and you are still held. Nothing is nesting tonight. There is a story in the older part of Scripture about a man who walked into the wilderness because he could not stand to be a person any longer. His name was Elijah. He had been a prophet, which meant that his whole life had been spent standing in front of people and saying difficult things. He had just come through the largest day of his life. It had gone well, in the way that large days go well, and afterward he was empty in a way he had not expected. Then word came that a powerful woman wanted him dead, and something in him gave out. He ran. He ran south, out past the last towns, out to where the road stops being a road. He left his servant behind at the edge of it, because there are places a person needs to go alone, and he went out another day's walk into the desert. And then he sat down under a broom tree. That is a real plant. It is not much of a tree. It is a dry shrub with thin branches and small leaves, and out there it is the only shade for miles, so it counts as a tree because nothing else is competing. He sat down under it and said, "It is enough. Take my life. I am no better than my fathers." Notice what that is. That is not a prayer of faith. That is a man at the end of himself, saying the true thing out loud in an empty place. And notice what does not happen next. He is not corrected. He is not lectured. Nothing arrives to explain to him why he is wrong to feel this way. No one tells him to have more courage, or to remember what happened yesterday, or to be grateful. He falls asleep under the shrub. That is the first thing that happens. He sleeps. And while he is asleep, something touches him and says, "Get up and eat." And when he looks, there is bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water beside his head. He eats, he drinks, and then he lies down and sleeps again. Consider how far he had walked to get there. A day out past the last town, and then another day into the waste. Nobody walks that far unless they are trying to get away from being reachable. He wanted to be unreachable, and the strange kindness of that story is that he was reached anyway, and not with a demand. You may have made yourself unreachable in some small way today. Left a message unanswered, kept the door shut, said nothing at dinner. That is allowed. It is also not a barrier to being looked after. Read that once more slowly. Read that once more slowly, because it is one of the kindest sequences anywhere in the whole book. Sleep, food, water, sleep again. Only after that, much later, does anything get said. Only after that does he get up and walk on and hear the quiet voice on the mountain, the one that comes not in the wind and not in the fire, but in a sound so small that you have to already be still to hear it. But first sleep, first bread, first sleep again. Whoever was looking after Elijah that day understood something that we forget almost every night. A tired body cannot receive an answer. You have been trying to receive answers with a tired body all evening. That is what the racing has been. Your mind has been going back and forth over the same ground looking for a resolution, and the resolution will not come, and it will not come, and you are convinced that it will not come because you have not thought hard enough yet. That is not why. It will not come because you are tired. The bread came before the message. That order is not an accident. Consider how much pressure that lifts off tonight. You do not have to figure it out before you sleep. Sleeping is the first part of figuring it out. It is not the thing you do after the work. It is the beginning of the work, and it is the part you are least in charge of, which is why it is restful. Picture the place. It is late afternoon in a dry country. The light is going long and orange across the sand. There is a low shrub with gray-green branches, and under it a strip of shade just big enough for one exhausted man. He is dusty, his feet hurt, his whole self hurts. He is not praying well. He is not being an example. He is lying on the ground under a bush saying he has had enough. And he is fed anyway. That is grace. It does not wait for you to be at your best. It comes out to the place where you gave up, and it puts warm bread by your head. Notice, too, that he is not woken for anything urgent. He is woken to eat, and then he is allowed to go straight back to sleep. Nobody makes him stay up. Nobody says, "While you are awake, let us discuss the situation." The kindness of that is almost funny. He was woken up to be looked after, and then tucked back in. You may need that tonight, more than you need any advice. There is nothing to discuss right now. There is nothing you must decide before morning. If a decision comes up in your mind and stands there waiting, you can tell it, quietly, that the office is closed. It will still be there. Decisions are patient. They wait far better than we think they will. Let the picture stay simple. Warm stone, flat bread, a jar of water sweating a little in the heat, a dry branch overhead moving slightly, throwing thin shade across a sleeping face. That is all that was required of him, to lie there and be looked after. That is all that is required of you. Stay in that shade a little longer. There is no hurry in this story, and there is none in this room. The desert at the end of the day cools faster than you would expect. The sand gives back its heat all at once and then goes cold, and the air over it moves in slow, wide breaths. A man asleep on that ground would feel the warmth leaving the stones under his shoulder. He would pull his cloak closer without waking. His breathing would slow and go deep. That is what a body does when it is finally allowed to stop. Your body wants to do that right now. It has been waiting all evening for permission. Notice where you are still holding something. Often it is the shoulders. Often it is the hands, curled slightly, ready for a task that is not coming. Sometimes it is the tongue, pressed against the roof of the mouth, as though a sentence is about to be said. No sentence is about to be said. Let the tongue rest. There is no one in this story who is being asked to be strong. That is worth saying twice, because the mind will try to smuggle strength back in as a requirement. He was not strong. He said so. He said it in plain words to the empty air. And the answer to it was bread. Not encouragement, not a plan. Bread and water and a second sleep. Peace in this story has a very simple shape. It is the shape of being fed while you sleep. A man who has given up is still held. That is the whole message of the broom tree. He was held before he ate. He was held while he slept. He was held all the way out there where nobody was watching. Stay with the bread for a moment, because the bread is the whole tenderness of it. It was baked on hot stones. That is the detail the text gives, and it is a very domestic one. Somebody had made a small fire and let it burn down, and laid dough directly on the heat. That is how bread was made in a house. It is the ordinary bread of ordinary people. Nothing exotic was sent to him. No feast, no sign. Flat bread and a jar of water, the same thing he had eaten 1,000 times in kitchens. Notice how carefully unremarkable that is. The care did not arrive as spectacle. It arrived as supper. That is usually how it arrives. It is worth saying plainly, because the mind at night is often waiting for something dramatic to prove that it is not alone, and the proof keeps showing up as bread. A blanket that is warm enough, a bed that is yours, the fact that the day ended and you are lying down in a quiet room. None of that feels like an answer. All of it is bread on hot stones. There is peace in noticing the small provisions, not gratitude as a task, just noticing. The warmth under you was made by your own body and is being held by the blanket. That is a small mercy, and it is working right now without your help. There is one more detail in the story that is easy to miss. There is one more detail in the story that is easy to miss. When he wakes the second time, he is told, the journey is too much for you. Not you are weak, not you should be able to manage this. The journey is too much for you. That is a statement of fact, spoken with tenderness, and it is spoken by the one who then feeds him for it. Something in you has been waiting a long time to hear a sentence like that. You have been carrying a load and calling it normal, and correcting yourself for finding it heavy, and privately wondering what is wrong with you that other people seem to manage. The load is heavy, that is the whole answer. It is heavy, and you have been carrying it, and no one has said so out loud. Say it now, in the dark, to no one. This has been heavy. And then let it be true without needing to fix it. Elijah did eventually get up. He did eventually walk on, and the small, quiet voice did eventually come, and it did not scold him either. But that was days later. It was not that night. That night, the whole of the plan for him was rest. You are inside a night like that one. The plan for you tonight is rest. There is no second item on the list. There is nothing after it. Peace is not something you are being asked to produce. It is being brought to you. The way bread was brought out to a shrub in the desert, while you were too tired to ask for it properly. You do not have to ask for it properly. Lie still. Let the branch move over you. Let the light go long and orange and then go out. You are held under the broom tree. Sleep is the first thing, and tonight it is also the only thing. There is a scene in the Gospels that takes place inside a house in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, and almost nothing happens in it. A teacher came to a village and stopped at the home of two sisters. One was called Martha. The other was called Mary. They were, by all accounts, close, and the house was Martha's, and she was the one who opened the door. So she did what a person does when someone important arrives. She began to work. Understand what that means in that time and place. It means water carried from outside. It means the small fire built up. It means bread, and something with the bread, and cups found and wiped, and a place made ready to sit, and the doorway swept, and the whole long chain of small tasks that hospitality is actually made of. None of it is unreasonable. All of it is love. And while she was doing it, her sister sat down on the floor near the visitor and stayed there. Just sat, listening. Now we are told that Martha was distracted by much serving. That is the phrase, distracted, pulled in many directions at once. Notice that word, because it is not a word about hands. It is a word about the mind. Her hands were fine. Her hands knew exactly what they were doing. Her hands had done this 1,000 times. It was her mind that was going in 6 directions. The bread will burn. There is not enough. She is sitting there. Someone should say something. If I say something, I will sound unkind. Why am I the only one? The water, the fire. She is still sitting there. That is the racing. That is exactly the thing you are lying here with tonight. It is not the tasks. It is the running commentary underneath the tasks. Think about the hour of day, middle of the afternoon, the hottest, slowest part. Nothing urgent was happening anywhere in that village. The whole scene takes place in the least dramatic hour there is, and it has lasted 2,000 years. Ordinary hours hold more than we give them credit for. This one does too. At some point it built up enough that she came out and said it. At some point it built up enough that she came out and said it. She said, "Do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me." There is heat in that. There is also enormous honesty. She said the loud thought out loud, which is more than most of us manage. And the answer came, and it is one of the gentlest sentences in the whole book, and it begins by saying her name twice. Martha, Martha. You only say a name twice like that to someone you are fond of. It is what you say to a child who has been crying for a while. It is not a rebuke. It is a hand on the shoulder made out of words. Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but few things are needed, really only one. Notice what he did not say. He did not say the work was worthless. He did not say the bread did not matter. He did not tell her she had been wrong to serve, and he certainly did not tell her she was lesser person than her sister. He named the weight, many things. He named the feeling, anxious and troubled. And then he made the world smaller for her. Only one thing is needed. That is the medicine tonight. Your mind at this hour is doing what Martha's mind was doing. It has laid out the whole house at once. Tomorrow, and the thing after tomorrow, and the conversation, and the money, and the message you did not answer, and the person you are worried about, and underneath it, all the low hum that says you are the only one holding any of it. Many things, all of them at once, all of them at midnight. And the answer is not to solve the many things. It is to notice that at this hour, only one thing is needed. And the one thing is not a task. Mary was not doing anything. That is the part that offends the busy part of us. She was not contributing. She was sitting on a floor. But she had found the one thing, which was to be near and to be still, and to let the afternoon be what it was. You can do that lying down. That is the whole point of tonight. You are not being asked to serve anyone right now. There is no bread in the oven. The house is quiet and the fire is low and nobody is coming. Consider how much of your mental running is rehearsal for tasks that are not happening. You are laying a table for a meal that is 11 hours away. You are carrying water for a fire that is not lit. Put the jar down at the edge of the room. It will still be there in the morning, and in the morning you will have hands and light and coffee, and it will be a different thing entirely. Nothing that you are turning over at this hour will be improved by turning it over again. One more thing about the two sisters. They stayed sisters. Nothing in that afternoon broke anything. There is no account anywhere of a rift. Which means the sentence spoken to Martha was received the way it was given, which is to say gently, and then the day went on, and there was a meal, and it was fine. Most of what feels enormous at midnight resolves like that, not with a scene, with a meal and the day going on. Let the thing you are turning over be a thing that resolves quietly, off-screen, without your supervision. It probably will. Most of them do. Let the house be real for a moment. Let the house be real for a moment. It helps the mind to have somewhere to stand. It was a small house of pale stone with thick walls that kept the day's heat out. The floor was packed earth, swept smooth by years of feet. There was a low doorway, and the light came through it in one warm bar across the room. Dust moved in that bar of light, slowly, the way dust does when nothing in a room is hurrying. There were jars along one wall. There was a shallow fire in a corner, and the smell of it in the walls. There was a cloth on a stone shelf and a bowl, and the particular quiet of a house in the middle of the afternoon. Think about how quiet that house would have been under the talking. Thick walls, no traffic, no machinery anywhere in the world yet. Underneath every sound there was a silence we have almost never heard. That silence is still available at this hour in your own house, and it is one of the few things that has not changed in 2,000 years. Mary was sitting in that bar of light. Mary was sitting in that bar of light, not doing, just there. And Martha was moving through the shadow at the edge of the room, back and forth, carrying things. Both of them loved him. That is important. This is not a story about a good sister and a poor one. It is a story about two ways of being in the same room, and about which one the tired heart can survive. Notice how much of your night has been Martha's shadow at the edge of the room, back and forth, carrying. You are allowed to step into the bar of light and sit down. Nothing will fall apart while you do. The jars will hold. The fire will bank itself. The house will keep standing without your walking through it. Peace lives in that bar of light, and there is room in it for you. Consider Martha again for a moment, because she deserves better than she usually gets. She is not the villain of that afternoon. She loved him. She opened her house to him. Everything she was doing for him. That is the painful part, and it is the part that will feel familiar. Almost all of your rushing is love. The worry about the money is love. The worry about the person who has not answered is love. The rehearsal of tomorrow is love, wearing itself out. Nobody in that house was doing anything wrong. Notice how much gentler the night becomes when you stop treating your own anxiety as a character flaw. It is love with nowhere to put itself down. So put it down here, not away, down. You can love all of it and still stop carrying it for 8 hours. Those are not in conflict. Nobody in that house loved anyone less by sitting on the floor. There is peace in loving something without holding it up. The bread would have been fine. It is always fine. There is a soft detail worth sitting inside. There is a soft detail worth sitting inside. Somewhere in that house, after the conversation, the noon just went on. The bread was probably a little plainer than Martha had planned. The cups were probably fine. Nobody remembered the sweeping. What was remembered for 2,000 years afterward was a woman sitting quietly on a floor. Notice that. The thing that lasted was the resting, not the rushing. That is not a rule about housework. It is a small kindness aimed straight at the part of you that believes rest has to be justified. It does not. It is the one thing needed, and tonight it is needed by you. Feel the room you are in. It is doing nothing. It is holding you the way that house held that afternoon, without asking you to earn the space. You do not have to be useful to be welcome here. And if the list starts up again, and it will, you do not have to fight it. Just let the sentence come in over the top of it, in the voice of someone fond of you, saying your name twice. You are anxious and troubled about many things. Only one thing is needed. You are held while the bread is unbaked, and the floor is unswept, and the whole list is undone. That is peace. It does not ask you to finish. It only asks you to sit down. You have sat down. That is enough for tonight. There is a story sometimes told about a girl who went to stay with her grandfather one summer in a farmhouse at the end of a long dirt road. She was 9 or perhaps 10. She was the kind of child who noticed everything and then carried all of it to bed with her. The house was old and simple. There was a kitchen with a heavy table in the middle of it, and a family Bible on a shelf by the window with a cloth over it to keep the dust off. There was a stove that ticked as it cooled at night. There were stairs that complained on the 4th step, always the 4th, so that nobody in that house ever went up or down in secret. And upstairs there was a small room under the roof with a narrow bed in it, and that was hers for the summer. The days were good. She helped with the hens. She learned which of them would let themselves be picked up. She walked out to the fence line in the long evenings and watched the light go pink and then gray over the fields. The days were good and the nights were terrible. Because when the house went quiet, her mind woke up. She would lie in that narrow bed and think about her mother, who was far away. She would think about school in the autumn, which was a whole season off, and yet somehow present in the room with her. She would think about a girl who had been unkind to her in the spring, and she would say things back to that girl in her head, better things than she had managed at the time. She would think about whether the hens were cold. She would think about dying in the vague, enormous way that children sometimes do at 11 at night, and then she would be too frightened to go downstairs and too frightened to stay where she was. Some nights she cried quietly, so nobody would hear. But the fourth step always tells, and old men do not sleep deeply, and after a week of this her grandfather came up. He did not turn on a light. He sat on the end of the bed, which sagged toward him, and he said nothing for a while. Then he said, "Still going, is it?" And she said, "I cannot make it stop." He nodded in the dark. He seemed to think about it for a long time, which is a thing children remember, because most adults answer immediately. Then he went back downstairs, and she heard him moving around, and after a few minutes he came back up carrying something. It was a basket, an ordinary one, woven the kind they used for eggs, with a cloth folded in the bottom. He put it on the floor beside her bed. He said, "Here is what we will do. Every thought that will not leave you alone, you put it in here. You say it out loud if you like, or you just think it into the basket. Either way." Consider how carefully he chose that object. Not a box with a lid, not a drawer, a basket, open at the top, woven loose enough to see through. Nothing was being hidden, nothing was being locked away. It was all still there in the room, visible, and simply not in her hands. That is the difference between avoiding a thing and setting it down. She said, "And then what?" She said, "And then what?" He said, "And then I will sit here and watch them. I am old and I do not sleep much anyway. They will not go anywhere. If you want any of them back in the morning, they will be right here in this basket." Notice how careful that is. He did not tell her the thoughts were silly. He did not say there was nothing to worry about, which is the sentence every anxious person has heard and no anxious person has ever believed. He did not ask her to stop. He gave the thoughts somewhere else to be. Consider what it cost him to come up those stairs. He was old, his back hurt, he had been asleep or nearly. And he got up and went up a narrow staircase in the dark because a child was crying quietly 2 floors away. That is worth carrying into sleep on its own. Someone getting up in the middle of the night for you without being asked and not being annoyed about it. That is grace, and it has stairs in it. So she tried it. The first one was the girl from school. She said it out loud badly, and it went into the basket. Then the hens. Then her mother, which took longer, and which she said very quietly. Then the autumn. Then the enormous vague one about dying, which she did not have words for, so she just put it in without words, and her grandfather nodded as though he had received it. She got to 9 or 10 of them, and somewhere around there she stopped being able to find any more, which surprised her, because an hour earlier there had been 100. She said, "Is that all of them?" He said, "That is plenty. Sleep now. I have them." And she slept. Consider how tired she was by the time he came up the stairs. Tired in the particular way of someone who has been awake for hours and has also been fighting themselves for hours. That second thing is the exhausting one. Half of what wears you out at night is not the worry. It is the arguing with the worry. Set the argument down as well. You do not have to win anything tonight. Rest is not the prize for winning. It is what you get when you stop competing. In the morning, she came down. And the basket was on the kitchen table, with the cloth folded in the bottom of it, empty of anything you could see, and she looked in it out of curiosity. She could remember only 3 of the things she had put in. The other 6 or 7 were simply gone, and she could not reconstruct them. That is the true part of this story, and it is true whether the grandfather ever existed or not. Most of what keeps you awake cannot survive being set down. It only lives by being held. Notice what the basket actually did. It did not solve anything. The girl who had been unkind was still unkind. Autumn was still coming. Her mother was still far away. The basket changed one thing only. It changed who was holding them through the night. And that is the whole invitation of this hour. You are not being asked to stop thinking. That has never worked. Not once. Not for anyone. You are being offered somewhere to put it. There is a very old line in Scripture about casting your cares, because you are cared for. It is not asking you to be indifferent. It is describing a transfer. You are not throwing the thought away. You are handing it over. There is a difference, and your body knows the difference even when your mind argues about it. So do what the girl did. It does not require belief tonight. It only requires the gesture. Take the loud one, the one that has been circling since you turned the light off. Say it plainly in your own head without dressing it up. Then set it down beside the bed. It will not go far. It is not being destroyed. It will be right there in the morning if you want it back. Then the next one, then the next. You will run out sooner than you expect. 9 or 10 is usually the whole harvest. It feels like 100 because they keep coming back around, and each lap feels like a new one. They are not new. It is a small basket's worth, walking in a circle. And the one who is sitting up with them does not get tired, and does not sleep much anyway, and has been doing this for a very long time. Let the farmhouse be real around you for a while. The mind rests better when it has a room to be in. The window in that small room under the roof did not close properly, so there was always a thin line of night air coming in, cool along the floor. The blanket was heavy and smelled faintly of soap and of the wooden chest it had been kept in. Outside there was a field, and past the field a line of trees, and past the trees nothing at all for miles. Nothing was happening out there. That is the thing about the country at night. There is no traffic, no voices, nothing that needs a response. Just the small sounds a farm makes while it rests. A hen shifting on a perch, a beam settling, wind moving over grass that is already lying down. The whole place was resting, and it did not require anyone to supervise the resting. Notice that phrase. It did not require anyone to supervise. You have been supervising. That is what the racing is. It is a kind of night shift you were never assigned and never agreed to, and you have been working it for hours. The shift is over. Someone else is on. The girl did not learn a technique that summer, not really. What she learned was that she was not the only one awake. That is what changed everything, not the basket, the company. Rest is easier in company. Even a child knows this. Even a tired adult in a dark room knows it, though they may have forgotten they know it. You are not alone in this room. Whatever your thoughts are doing, they are not doing it unobserved. Let that settle. Let the shoulders come down a little further. There is nothing left that you personally must keep an eye on tonight. That is grace. It sits at the end of the bed and does not leave when the light goes out. Consider what the basket was really made of. Not the weaving, the offer. Somebody said, out loud, "I will hold these while you sleep." That is the entire mechanism, and children accept it instantly, and adults spend decades arguing with it. The adult version of the argument goes like this: if I hand it over, it will not be taken seriously. Nobody will care about it the way I care about it. If I stop holding it, it will fall. Notice how much pride is quietly folded into worry. There is a part of us that believes our worrying is a form of love, and that setting it down would be a kind of abandonment. It is not. The girl did not love her mother less by putting her into the basket. She loved her exactly the same and slept through the night. Your people are not safer because you are awake. That is the hard, freeing sentence of this whole hour. They are not safer. You are only more tired. So hand it over the way a child does, without the argument. There is peace on the other side of that handover, and it arrives faster than you expect. Usually within a few minutes, the body knows immediately. There is one more thing about that grandfather that is worth keeping. There is one more thing about that grandfather that is worth keeping. He stayed. He did not deliver the basket and go back to bed. He sat on the end of the mattress in the dark until her breathing changed. That is why it worked. A container is only comforting if someone is watching it. You are not putting your thoughts into an empty room tonight. Something is sitting at the end of the bed. You do not have to picture a face. You do not have to get the theology right at midnight. You only have to notice that the watching is not yours to do. Rest is what happens when the watching gets handed over. The kitchen is dark. The stove has stopped ticking. The basket is on the floor beside you with the cloth in the bottom. Whatever is in it, it is not in your hands anymore. That is grace. It does not ask you to have fewer thoughts. It only asks you to let them be somewhere else for a few hours. You are held, and so is everything you put down. Sleep now. He has them. There is a story in the older part of Scripture about a man who ran away from home with almost nothing and slept on the ground because he had nowhere else to be. His name was Jacob. His life up to that point had been complicated in the way that family lives are complicated. There had been a deception. There had been a brother who was understandably furious. There had been a mother who told him to leave for a while until it cooled. So he left. He walked north with a stick and a bag and a great deal of noise in his head. Consider what would be in that head. Regret, first, though he might not have called it that. The replay of the whole scene, what he had done and how he had done it. The look on his brother's face. Then fear. Whether his brother would follow, whether there was a road he should be avoiding, whether the family he was going to would even take him in. Then the practical loop, which is the one that keeps a person up most reliably, where the next water is, how long the bread will last, what he will say when he arrives. Then all of it again, from the beginning, in a slightly different order. He walked all day with that company, and when the sun went down, he was in open country with no village in sight, so he stopped where he was. The text says that he took one of the stones of that place and put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. That is a hard bed. Let us not romanticize it. Stone under the head, ground under the back, the cold coming up through the shoulders, a man with a churning mind lying in the open with nothing over him. If ever there was a night that should have been wasted, that was it. And what happened in that night is one of the strangest and most beautiful things in the whole book. He dreamed. He saw a stairway set on the earth with its top reaching into the sky, and messengers going up and down it, moving in both directions, as though the traffic between that place and everywhere else were entirely ordinary. And in the dream, he was told he would be kept. Wherever he went, he would be brought back. He would not be left. Then he woke up. And here is the sentence. He said, "The Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." Not the Lord came to this place. Not the Lord arrived because I dreamed well. The Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. The place had not changed. It was the same patch of dirt he had lain down on, the same stone, the same open country. It had been holy ground the entire time he was walking past it, and the entire time he was lying on it feeling wretched. Notice what that means for tonight. Your bed is not a waiting room. This is not the unimportant part of the day that has to be endured before the real hours start again in the morning. You are lying in a place where something is already happening, whether or not you can feel it. There is a particular loneliness in a bad night. Everyone else is asleep. The house is doing nothing. The hours have a stretched, abandoned quality, and the mind interprets that emptiness as absence. The emptiness is not absence. Jacob felt exactly that emptiness, with a rock under his ear, and it turned out to be the busiest place in the story. The stairway was there before the dream. He simply got tired enough to see it. That is worth sitting with. His exhaustion was not an obstacle to what happened. It was the doorway. If he had been comfortable, if there had been an inn, if the night had gone well, he would have walked past that field forever and never known what was over it. You do not have to be at your best to be met. You are not at your best tonight, and it does not matter at all. Let the field be real for a moment. It was open country, low hills, dry grass, stones showing through the soil where the rain had taken the dirt away. The kind of place a traveler passes through without a second look. The heat would have gone out of the air quickly after sundown. The sky would have opened up the way it does, where there are no lamps for 100 miles. And there would have been sound, not much. Grass moving, something small in the scrub, the tick of stones giving back the day's warmth. A man lying in that, alone, with a stone under his head. Notice that he did not build a shelter. He did not make a plan for the night. He was too tired for either, and the tiredness turned out to be a kindness, because it put him flat on the ground where the dream could find him. Sometimes the body simply overrules the mind, and that is a mercy, not a failure. That may be what happens to you tonight. The thinking will still be going, and somewhere underneath it, the body will simply decide that it has had enough, and you will not notice the moment it happens. Nobody ever notices that moment. You cannot watch yourself fall asleep. It is one of the few things in your life you were never given the controls for. Rest arrives when you are not looking at it. Rest is shy that way. So let the looking go. Stop checking whether it is working. There is peace in giving up the checking. It is a small surrender, and it costs you nothing. Think about the walking he had done that day. Hours of it, dust on his legs, the same 3 worries turning over and over in time with his footsteps, because that is what a long walk does to a mind. By the time the light went, he was too tired to keep worrying properly. That is a real state. You have been in it. There is a point past which the mind simply cannot maintain the machinery, and the whole apparatus starts to come apart, and thoughts get shorter and less organized, and finally stop making sentences. That point is coming for you tonight. It always comes. Notice that you do not have to reach it by effort. It is not a summit. It arrives on its own the way the tide comes in, whether or not anyone is waiting for it. so there is nothing left to do. The one thing that is going to happen tonight is the one thing you cannot make happen. That is a strange kind of freedom, and it is worth resting in. He lay down in a field with a rock under his head, and the machinery came apart, and what was underneath it was a stairway. Consider the stone itself. Consider the stone itself. He picked it up. That detail always stays with people. In the morning, he set it upright and poured oil on it and marked the place because he wanted to remember. The thing that had been his hard pillow became the marker of the best night of his life. Something in that is very close to what happens with a hard night and a tired person. The place where you had nothing under your head is often the place you look back at later and say, something was there. You do not have to understand that now. You do not have to draw any conclusion at all. It is enough to lie down in the place you are actually in, without needing it to be a better place first. Feel the ground. Feel the weight of your own head and how much of it is being carried by something other than you. Your pillow is softer than his was. That is not a small thing. Notice it. Notice the difference between stone and cloth. Notice the warmth that your own body has already put into the bed under you. The night is not empty. It has never once been empty. There is traffic on the stairway over this house, up and down, unhurried, ordinary, both directions, all night, and none of it requires your attention or your permission. You do not have to watch it. It goes on while you sleep. That is rather the point of it. He was told he would be kept wherever he went. Not that the road would be easy, and not that the family behind him would be simple, and not that his own character would suddenly improve. Kept, that is all, held on the way. There is peace in a promise that's small and that's solid. It does not promise the outcome. It promises the company. So let the head go heavy. Let the churn go on for a while if it wants to. It ran all day beside him too, and it did not stop the dream from coming. The stairway does not wait for a quiet mind. It was already standing there in the dark over a man who had made a mess of things and run. Peace is not a feeling you have to manufacture before you are allowed to close your eyes. Peace is a fact about the field. The field was peaceful while he tossed on it. The peace was not waiting for his mood to improve. You are lying in that same field. The Lord is in this place, and you did not know it. You are held on a hard bed under an open sky, and you are held now, in this room, in this hour, with all of it unfinished. Sleep here. The ground under you is not what you thought it was. There is a story told among the old teachers of the desert about a hunter who came across something he did not expect. He had been out after birds in the scrub country where those old men and women lived, and he came over a rise and found one of them sitting with a group of younger ones, laughing, not praying, not fasting, not doing anything that looked serious at all, sitting on the ground in the shade with the young ones around him, enjoying himself, telling something funny. And the hunter was offended. Understand why. He had walked a long way with an idea in his head. These were the famous ones. These were the people who had left everything to be holy in the desert. He had expected to find them upright and severe, worn thin by their discipline, speaking in low voices about serious matters. He had expected a performance. What he found was a group of tired men resting in the shade, being fond of each other. The old man saw his face. These old teachers always saw the face. He said, "Put an arrow in your bow and draw it." The hunter did. He fitted the arrow and drew the string back. The old man said, draw it further. He drew it further. The old man said, "Further still." The hunter said, "If I draw it any further, the bow will break." And the old man said, "So it is with us. If we stretch ourselves beyond measure, we break. It is right from time to time to relax." That is the whole story. It is very short. Most of the desert stories are. But notice what it does, because it is doing something precise. The hunter was not corrected for being wrong about the desert. He was corrected for being wrong about strain. He believed, the way most serious people believe, that tension is the proof, that if you are not straining, you are not really trying, that the drawn bow is the true bow, and the loose one is a failure of nerve. It is not. A bow that stays bent is not a strong bow. It is a bow on its way to being firewood. Your mind tonight is a bow that has been drawn since morning. Consider how long it has actually been held. You woke and it went tight almost immediately, before your feet were on the floor. It stayed tight through the day, through the small decisions and the larger ones, through the tone of a message you could not read properly, through the traffic and the queue and the thing you forgot. And then evening came and nothing changed because nobody told the string. That is where you are now. The string does not know that the day is over. It is still holding, because holding is all it has done for so long that it no longer remembers the other position. The desert man's word is for the string. It is right from time to time to relax. Not as a reward, not once the work is finished. It is right because a person is made this way, and pretending otherwise does not make you stronger, it only makes you brittle. There is enormous permission in that, and it comes from a source that cannot be accused of laziness. This was said by a man who lived on bread and water in a stone cell for decades. He is not making excuses. He knows exactly what discipline costs, and he is telling you that constant tension is not discipline. It is damage. Notice how much of your night has been spent bending the bow further. You cannot sleep, and so you try harder to sleep, which is the same as drawing the string. You lie very still. You breathe in a determined way. You check whether it is working. You calculate how many hours are left. Every one of those is another inch of draw. The old man is not going to give you a better technique. He is going to tell you to take the arrow out and let the string go slack and put the whole thing down on the grass beside you. Feel what that would mean physically. There is a muscle somewhere in you right now that is still working. It is often in the face, between the eyebrows, or along the jaw, or in the small muscles around the eyes that are holding them closed rather than letting them be closed. Let those go, not by force. Force is more drawing. Just notice them, and they will let go on their own, the way a hand lets go of a rope when it finally remembers it is not being pulled. It is worth staying with the hunter for a moment, because most of us are the hunter. He came over that hill with an idea about what holiness looks like, and the idea had severity in it. Where did he get that idea? The same place you got yours. From somewhere in the culture, absorbed young, never examined. That the tired person is failing, that the resting person is behind, that a life with slack in it is a life that has given up. Notice how much of your inability to sleep is loyalty to that idea. Some part of you is not entirely convinced that you are allowed to stop. So it keeps a light on. It keeps a small watch running, just to demonstrate that you are still a serious person. The old man on the ground in the shade is telling you to put that down. He is not lazy. He has more discipline in one afternoon than most people manage in a year, and he is laughing with the young ones under a tree in the middle of the day. That is what an unbroken bow looks like. There is peace in giving up the performance of effort. Nobody is watching tonight. Nobody is grading the hours. There is another version of this same picture in the older writings. There is another version of this same picture in the older writings where a man is told to be still and know, not to work out, not to resolve, be still and know. Stillness comes first there too. It is always first. We keep trying to put it last. Consider what the young ones around that old man were learning while they sat in the shade laughing. They were learning that the life they had chosen would not eat them alive, that it had rest built into it, that there were afternoons in it, and jokes, and shade, and the ordinary loose companionship of people who are not performing anything for anyone. Nobody can keep going in a life with no slack in it. Those old teachers knew that, and so they built the slack in on purpose, and then they let a hunter walk over the hill and see it. Your life is allowed slack. Tonight is the slack. There is nothing being lost while you lie here. The bow is not becoming weaker. It is doing the only thing that keeps it able to be drawn again in the morning. Rest is not the opposite of strength. Rest is where strength is stored. Let the string go. Let it hang loose and slightly curved on the grass, the way an unstrung bow sits, harmless and patient and entirely ready for whenever it is next needed. You are not needed at this hour. That is not an insult. It is a gift, and it is only offered once a day, and it is being offered now. Feel the whole length of your body giving up its readiness. Ankles first, then the long muscles of the legs, then the hips, which hold more than people realize, then the low back, then the shoulders, then the hands. The hands especially. Open them or let them curl however they want, but let them stop being ready. There is peace in an unstrung bow. It is a very particular peace, and it has no achievement in it at all. That is grace. It does not ask how far you can draw. It takes the bow out of your hands and sets it down. You are held and you are not on duty. Nothing tonight needs your attention. Let the string rest until morning. There was once a man in France, a long time ago, who spent almost his whole adult life washing dishes. He had been a soldier when he was young, and there had been an injury, and afterward he came into a house of quiet men who cooked and prayed and worked, and he was put to work in the kitchen. He did not choose the kitchen. He disliked it at first. He said so plainly. It was hot, and it was greasy, and it never ended, because the thing about a kitchen is that as soon as it is clean, it is used again. Think about the first winter in that kitchen. Stone floor, cold coming up through the shoes, water that had to be heated and then went cold again in 10 minutes. He hated it, and he said so, and he stayed. Some of the best things in a life begin in a place you did not want to be, on a day you were not enjoying. He stayed in it for something like 30 years. He stayed in it for something like 30 years. And in those 30 years, standing over pots, he worked out something so simple that people have been reading about it ever since, in every kind of church, and in no church at all. What he worked out was this: he did not need to be anywhere special to be near God. He could be near while scraping a pan. That sounds mild. It is not mild. It undid the entire structure that most people carry around, in which there are holy hours and ordinary hours, and the ordinary ones do not count. But that is not the part that matters most tonight. The part that matters tonight is what he said about his mind. He said that his mind wandered constantly, not once, not occasionally, constantly and easily and immediately, the way a mind does. He would set out to keep his attention where he wanted it, and within moments he would be thinking about the fish delivery, or about something a brother had said, or about nothing in particular, and he would come back and find himself far away. And here is what he did about it. He came back, that was all. He came back quietly without making a scene about it, and he did not scold himself. He was very clear about this. The scolding, he said, made everything worse. It added an hour of misery to a moment of wandering, and it did not improve the wandering at all. So he simply turned around and returned, the way you would step back into a warm kitchen from a cold hallway, and got on with the pan he was holding. See how ordinary that is. There is no method in it. There is no counting, no posture, no special breathing. Wander, return, wander, return. 20 times an hour for 30 years, over dishwater. He said that after a long time it became easier, though he never claimed it became perfect. He never claimed to arrive anywhere. He described himself, near the end of his life, as still a beginner. Think about the water in that basin. Warm at the start of the stack, cooler by the end, gray with fat and ash. He would empty it and refill it, and the new water would be hot again, and his hands would go back in. Refilling is not failure. It is just what the work is. You will refill this basin many times in your life. Tonight is one of the refills. That word should go straight into your chest tonight. That word should go straight into your chest tonight. Still a beginner after 30 years. Because part of what has been keeping you awake is a quiet verdict you have passed on yourself. Everyone else can settle their mind. Everyone else lies down and goes to sleep like a normal person. There is something wrong with the way you are made. There is nothing wrong with the way you are made. There is a man who spent 3 decades on this and called himself a beginner, and he was one of the calmest people anyone in that house had ever met. The calm did not come from succeeding. It came from not punishing himself for the returns. It is worth saying that he never wrote a book about this. Other people wrote down what he said later, because they had been in the room with him and had wanted to know how he did it. He had no method to give them. He said the same few things over and over, and the things were almost embarrassingly plain. Do the small thing in front of you. Come back when you wander. Do not be harsh with yourself about the wandering. That is the entire teaching of a very calm man. You already know how to do all 3. There is nothing to learn tonight. Consider the kitchen for a moment, because the kitchen is the whole teaching. Consider the kitchen for a moment, because the kitchen is the whole teaching. It is late afternoon. The big meal is done. There is a stone floor, wet in patches. There are pots stacked, blackened on the outside, still warm. There is a window high in the wall, with the last of the light in it. There is steam. There is the smell of soap and onions and old smoke. And there is a man with his sleeves rolled up, working through the stack without hurrying. Because hurrying does not make a stack of pots any shorter. His mind goes off. He notices. He comes back. The water is warm around his hands. That helps. He said things like that too, that the warmth of the water was part of it. Nothing in that scene is straining. Nothing in it is impressive. It is the least dramatic holiness imaginable, and it is available to a person lying in a bed at 1 in the morning. Because that is exactly what you are being invited into now. Your attention is going to wander tonight. It is going to leave this story and go to the thing that is bothering you, probably several times, probably within the next few minutes. That is not the failure. That was never the failure. The only thing being asked is the return, gently, without commentary. You come back to the sound of the voice, or to the warmth under the blanket, or to the weight of your own arm where it lies. And when you go again, you come back again. Wander, return. Notice that there is no scoreboard anywhere in this. He was not counting his returns. Nobody was counting them. If he had been counting, that would have been another thing to be anxious about. Let go of the scoreboard. There is no measurement of tonight that anyone is going to look at. Consider how long 30 years is. 30 winters of cold water, 30 summers of a hot kitchen, the same room, the same stack, the same hour of the afternoon. Nothing about that life would photograph well. There is no moment in it that anyone would call a turning point. And yet, the people who lived with him said that the room changed when he was in it. That is what steady, unglamorous returning does to a person over a long time. It does not produce fireworks. It produces weather, a climate that other people can stand inside of. You are not going to become that tonight. Nobody becomes that in a night. But you can do one return. That is all this hour is asking. One return made gently, without commentary, and then sleep. The mind will go off again. Let it. That is not the end of anything. There is peace in a practice with no failure condition. That is what he found among the pots, and it is why he was calm. Nothing you do tonight can go wrong. There is no wrong available. You cannot fail at lying still in the dark. Feel the whole weight of that. Whatever happens between now and morning, whether you sleep at midnight or at 4, the night is not a test you can pass or fail. It is a kitchen. You work through it. It is never finished. The water is warm. There is one more thing about him worth carrying into sleep. There is one more thing about him worth carrying into sleep. He was not sad about any of this. That is what struck the people who wrote about him. He was cheerful, not enthusiastic, not loud, just steadily and unremarkably content in a kitchen, doing the same thing every day for 30 years. Because the pressure was gone. He had stopped trying to have a mind he did not have. He had accepted the mind he actually had, which wandered, and he had found that it was welcome anyway. You are welcome anyway. Your wandering mind is not a barrier between you and rest. It is the mind that is going to fall asleep tonight, exactly as it is, without being improved first. Feel the water on your hands. Feel the warmth of it. Let the stack of pots be as tall as it is. You do not have to finish it. Nobody finishes a kitchen. That is peace. It does not require your attention to hold still. It only asks you to keep coming back, and it is not counting. You are held, wandering in all. Come back, then let go, then come back. Sleep is a kind of returning too. There is a story in the older part of Scripture about food that arrived every morning and could not be saved. A whole people were walking through a wilderness. They had left a hard place behind them and had not yet arrived anywhere, and in between there was nothing but dry country and sky. They were hungry. There was no way to grow anything out there, and nothing to hunt, and hunger in a crowd becomes fear very quickly. And then, one morning, there was something on the ground. It came with the dew. When the dew lifted, There was a fine, flaky thing lying over the desert floor, small as frost. They had never seen it. They said to each other, "What is it?" And the name they gave it was more or less that question. They gathered it. They found that it could be baked, and that it tasted faintly of honey and oil, and that there was enough. Every morning it was there, every single morning. And they were told one thing about it. Take what you need for today. Do not keep any of it until tomorrow. Notice how difficult that instruction is. Some of them could not do it. That is recorded plainly, without much comment. Some of them kept a portion back, hidden, because how could you not? You have been hungry. Something appears on the ground. Every part of a sensible person says, keep some, in case tomorrow it does not come. And what they kept overnight spoiled. It went bad and could not be eaten. The lesson was not delivered as a punishment. It was delivered as a fact about how that food worked. It was daily food. It was not designed to be stored because it was not really about the food. It was about the daily part. Think about the dew for a moment. It arrived first. Before the food, the dew, settling silently over a whole desert while everyone slept. Nobody watched it come. It always came. There is a great deal happening before you wake that is already on your side. There was one exception, which is lovely. There was one exception, which is lovely. Before the day of rest, they were told to gather twice as much, and that portion did not spoil. Even the rule about not storing bent itself to protect the resting. But every other day, it was today's bread only. That is the story. Now consider what your mind has been doing since you turned out the light. It has been gathering tomorrow's bread. That is exactly what the racing is. You are lying here at 1 a.m, trying to eat food that has not been given yet. You are working out how a conversation will go that has not happened. You are budgeting money against a bill that is not due. You are rehearsing a sentence for a meeting that is 11 hours away, and rehearsing it again in a slightly different order, and grading yourself on both versions. None of it is nourishing you. It cannot. It is not today's. Notice how it feels in the body when you do this. There is a low, hollow tightness under the ribs and a sense of urgency with nowhere to go. That is what it feels like to try to consume a thing that is not there. The old instruction is not asking you to be irresponsible. It is not saying, never plan. There were people in those stories who planned, who stored grain, who prepared. Planning happens in daylight, with other people, with a clear head. This is not planning. What is happening in your head at this hour is not planning, and some part of you already knows it. Planning produces a decision. This produces another lap. You have been around this particular track 4 times tonight, and you have arrived at nothing, and you will arrive at nothing on the 5th, because the mind at this hour is not equipped for it. It has no daylight. It has no information. It has only fear and a very good memory. So put it down, not forever, until the morning, when there will be bread on the ground for that day, as there has been every day so far. Think about the taste of it for a moment. The old text says it was like wafers made with honey, a small, plain sweetness, not a banquet, something a child would like. Whoever arranged that could have made it taste like nothing. Bread is bread. It did not have to be sweet. The sweetness was not necessary. That is exactly why it matters. There is a kind of care that goes past what is required, and it usually shows up in small, unnecessary details. Look for those. They are all over your life, and you have stopped seeing them. Consider that last part carefully. because it is the true argument here. Consider that last part carefully, because it is the true argument here. There has been bread on the ground every day of your life. Not always what you wanted, not always enough for the fears you had, but you have eaten every day. You have been carried through days you were absolutely certain you could not be carried through, including several that you spent an entire night dreading. That is not a small pattern. That is the whole record. The night you lay awake, worrying about a thing 3 years ago came and passed, and you cannot remember now how it resolved. Something arrived. Something always has. There is one more thing about food that comes daily. You cannot get ahead on it. That sounds like a limitation, and it is actually a rest. If you could gather a month at once, you would, and then you would spend the month guarding it. The people who tried to store it did not get a quieter mind. They got a hidden jar to worry about. You have fewer jars than you think. Almost none of tomorrow is in this room. Think about how quiet a camp of that size would be just before dawn. Thousands of people and almost no sound. A child somewhere, an animal shifting. Everyone asleep at once is one of the oldest peaceful things there is, and it is happening around you now, in your own street, in every house on it. Feel the desert in the early morning before the heat. Feel the desert in the early morning before the heat. Feel the desert in the early morning before the heat. The air is cool and still and very clear. The ground is gray, and across it, lying like a light frost, is enough. Nobody made it. Nobody earned it. It was simply there when the dew lifted. Whatever tomorrow needs will be there when the dew lifts. It is not in this room tonight, and it is not supposed to be. Consider what the desert did to those people over time. They had come out of a place where everything was controlled. Their days had been measured by someone else. There had been enough food, and there had been no freedom, and the two had come together in a way that made a kind of terrible sense. Out in the wilderness, there was freedom and no guarantee. That is much harder to live inside. So they were being taught something slowly, over years, and the lesson was delivered as breakfast. Every morning enough, not more, not stored. Every morning, again. That is not a lesson you learn once. It is a lesson you learn 4,000 times, one morning at a time, until the body stops bracing. Your body still braces. Of course it does. Something in your history taught it that provision is uncertain, and it has been on watch ever since. You cannot argue that out of a body. You can only feed it, day after day, and let it slowly discover that the morning keeps coming. Tonight is one of those nights, nothing dramatic. Just another night in which you are fed and sheltered, and nothing catastrophic happens while you sleep. Those nights are the whole education. They add up under the surface. There is peace in the accumulation of ordinary mornings. Let this be one more. There is a phrase in the prayer that Christians of every kind pray. There is a phrase in the prayer that Christians of every kind pray, and it says, "Give us this day our daily bread." This day. It does not say, "Give us the week." It does not say, "Show us the plan." The prayer is deliberately short-sighted. It was made that way on purpose, by someone who understood exactly what a human mind does at night. You have today's bread. You have eaten. There is a roof and a bed and a blanket and enough warmth, and the hours between now and morning are already provided for. There is nothing else that has to be gathered before the sun comes up. Let the basket sit empty beside you. You are not hoarding tonight. Notice how much lighter the room becomes when tomorrow is not in it. That is peace. It does not promise you the whole road. It promises a portion in the morning on the ground where you will be able to reach it. You are held for the length of one night, and one night is all that is being asked of you. Rest now. The bread for tomorrow has not been made yet, and it is not yours to make. There is a story sometimes told about a woman who lived alone on a small piece of land at the edge of a village after her husband died. She was not old at first. She became old there. That is how it went. The years passed, and she kept the place going, and the village got used to seeing her lamp in the window at the end of the day. She had a great deal to worry about, and she was not a serene person by nature. That is the part of the story people usually leave out, and it is the part that makes it useful. She worried about the roof. She worried about a debt. She worried about her son, who had gone to the city and did not write often, and about her daughter, who wrote too often and was unhappy. She worried about the weather in a way that only people who live off the ground do, which is not a mood but a whole second occupation. For the first year after her husband died, she did not sleep well at all. She would lie in that quiet house, and the whole list would stand up around the bed and talk to her. Then she began doing something, and she did it every night for the rest of her life. It was very simple. It was not a ritual anyone taught her. She invented it out of tiredness. Before she went up to bed, she would sit down at the kitchen table with the lamp still lit. The family Bible was on that table, kept there because it had always been there, and she left it closed. And she would say her worries out loud, one at a time, into the room. Not as a speech, not in fine language. She would just say them the way you would set objects down on a table. The roof over the back room. The money owed to the miller. My son who does not write. My daughter who is not happy. The frost if it comes early. She would go through them slowly, and she would let each one land on the table in front of her, and she would not try to solve any of them while she was doing it. That was the rule she had made without ever putting it into words. No solving at the table, only setting down. And when she had gone through the whole list, she would put out the lamp and say the same thing every night, which was, "That is all of them, and they are here on the table, and I am going up." Then she went up. Notice how physical that is. She did not close her eyes and try to feel differently. She did not talk herself out of anything. She did not tell herself that the roof would be fine, because she did not know that the roof would be fine. She moved the worries out of her body and into a place, the table. That is the whole mechanism, and it is why it worked for 40 years. A worry that stays in the chest circles, a worry that has been set down on a wooden table, at least has somewhere to be that is not you. The village noticed that she was, in her later years, one of the calmer people any of them knew. Not soft, not vague. Calm in a way that had weight to it because everyone knew what she had been carrying. A younger woman asked her once how she managed. She said something like, "I do not carry it upstairs." That was the whole of her teaching. She had no other. Consider whether you have been carrying it upstairs. Almost certainly you have. That is what tonight has been. The whole table came up the stairs with you, and it has been standing in the dark beside the bed for hours, and every so often you reach out and touch it to make sure it is still there. It is still there. It does not need checking. So do what she did right now, lying down. It works lying down. The table can be anywhere you decide it is. Say them silently or under your breath, plainly, no arranging. Name the first one, set it down. Then the next, set it down. Do not fix any of them. Fixing is carrying, only setting down. Notice that some of them will be embarrassing. When said plainly, most worries are. Said out loud in a simple sentence, they shrink to their real size, which is usually smaller than the shape they had while they were pacing around in the dark. And some will not shrink. Some are genuinely heavy, and they will stay heavy, and they will still be on the table in the morning. That is fine. The table can hold heavy things. Tables are made for that. Think about how long she did it. 40 years, more or less. 14,000 nights of sitting down at a table and saying out loud the things that frightened her. That is not a moment of enlightenment. That is a habit, worn into a floor. The first year, it barely worked. She said so, apparently, when she was old. The first year, she would set them down and then pick half of them up again on the stairs. That is worth knowing. The setting down is a skill, and skills are clumsy at the beginning. So if tonight you set one down and then find it in your hands again 10 minutes later, that is not evidence that this does not work for you. That is the first year. Set it down again. That is the whole of the practice. Down and picked up and down again. Over time, the picking up gets rarer. It does not disappear. It gets rarer. And one night, years later, someone asks you how you manage, and you say something short that sounds like wisdom and is really just a habit that has been running for a long time. There is peace in a habit. It carries you on the nights when you have nothing. You do not have to feel this working tonight. There is one more part of her story worth keeping. There is one more part of her story worth keeping. She left the Bible closed on that table. She was not reading it at night. She was not looking for a verse to make her feel better. She simply put her worries down next to it, in the dark, and went up to bed. There is something honest in that. She did not have to feel anything. She did not have to work up trust. She just left the load in a place she believed was watched, and let it be watched. You may not feel anything tonight either. That is allowed. The setting down does not require a feeling. It only requires the gesture, repeated night after night, until the body learns it. There is a kind of peace that has nothing to do with optimism. Hers was that kind. She did not believe the roof would hold. She believed the table was watched, and that was enough to sleep on. Peace like that is available to a person who is still afraid. That is worth hearing twice. You do not have to stop being afraid to be held. You are held while the list is long. You are held while the answers are missing. Feel the kitchen after she has gone up. The lamp is out. The stove is cooling and clicking. The table is a dark shape in a dark room, with everything she owns of trouble sitting on it. And upstairs, a woman is asleep. Nothing has been solved. Everything has been placed. That is grace. It does not ask you to resolve the list. It only asks you to stop carrying it up the stairs. You are held, and so is the table, and so is the house, and so is the frost if it comes. Set them down, then go up. There is a very short parable in the Gospels that almost nobody quotes, and it may be the one you need most tonight. It goes something like this. A man scatters seed on the ground. Then he sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows, and he does not know how. That is nearly the whole of it. 4 lines, No characters with names, no crowd, no argument. But notice the sentence in the middle of it. He sleeps and rises, night and day, and he does not know how. He does not know how. The man who planted the field cannot explain the field. He has no idea what is happening down there in the dark. He cannot see it, cannot supervise it, cannot hurry it, and could not stop it if he tried. And the growing happens anyway. It happens most of all at night, while he is lying in his house with his eyes closed, doing nothing whatsoever about it. Consider what an enormous relief that is if you let it in. There is a picture some of us carry, mostly without ever examining it, in which the good things in our lives are being held up by our attention, as though the job continues because we worry about the job, as though the relationship holds because we run it through our head at midnight, as though the child is safe, partly because we are lying here thinking about the child. That picture feels responsible. It is not responsible. It is exhausting, and it is not how any of it actually works. The seed grows while the sower sleeps. Notice that the man is not lazy in this story. He did scatter the seed. That was real work, and it happened in daylight, with his hands, and nobody else did it for him. He will also reap later when the grain is ready, and that will be real work too. But between the sowing and the reaping there is a long stretch, and in that stretch his only job is to sleep and rise night and day and let the ground do what the ground does. Most of your life is that middle stretch. You have sown. You did the work today. You made the call, sent the message, showed up, cooked the meal, held the difficult conversation as well as you could hold it. That is done. It is in the ground now. And the thing you are trying to do at this hour is dig it up to check on it. That is what the racing is at the end of the analysis. It is a man going out in the dark with a lamp to scrape the soil back and look at a seed. Notice what that does to a seed. Nothing good. But mostly it does nothing at all, because the seed is going to do what it is going to do, and the digging only tires the man. The field is not waiting for your supervision. It has never once waited for it. Feel the picture of it, a field at night. Long, low, dark, sloping slightly. The soil still holding a little of the day's warmth, rows barely visible. And underneath, everything happening. Water moving through the ground, a seed swelling and splitting, a pale root going down blindly and finding what it needs without being told. None of it is loud. That is the striking thing about growth. The largest processes in the natural world make almost no sound. The wheat that will feed a village is going up at this very moment, silently, in the dark, and there is not a single person watching it. Consider what happens to a field in a single night. It rains, perhaps. The water goes down into the soil, past the surface, into the dark where the roots are. The temperature drops, and the ground gives back its heat slowly, and that slow warmth is exactly what a seed needs to keep working. Things move through the soil. Small creatures turn it over. Air gets in where it could not get in before. None of that was planned by anyone. None of it needed to be requested. The field simply has a night, and the night does its work. Your life is also having a night right now. There are things happening in it that you cannot see and would not know how to arrange. Something is settling that was churned up yesterday. Something in your body is repairing itself. Something in your memory is being sorted into a shape that will make more sense in the morning. Sleep is not a pause in your life. It is one of the working hours, and it is the one you are least in charge of. There is peace in a working hour that requires nothing of you. So let the night have the field. Now consider the man in the house at the edge of that field. Now consider the man in the house at the edge of that field. His shutters are closed. He is under a blanket. Perhaps his back hurts from the sewing. He is asleep in the ordinary heavy way of someone who has worked outdoors. He is not neglecting his field. He is participating in it correctly. That last sentence is worth carrying into sleep with you. Sleeping is not the absence of caring for your life. It is part of how a life is cared for. Consider the harvest for a moment and then let it go. It is months away. It is not in this room either. Between now and then there are 100 nights exactly like this one, and the field will use every one of them. You are allowed to be in the middle of something long. Almost everything worth having is long. The middle of it is mostly sleeping and rising, night and day, and not knowing how. There is an old line in the Psalms. There is an old line in the Psalms about how it is useless to rise early and sit up late, eating the bread of anxious toil, because rest is given to those he loves. It is not a scolding, it is almost a joke, in the way that very old wisdom is sometimes a joke. You are getting up before dawn and going to bed after midnight and working the whole time. And look, the thing was given while you slept. The seed does not know that you are worried. It is not going faster because of your attention, and it will not go slower without it. So let the field be dark. Let the thing you set in motion today be in the ground, unwatched, ungraded, unexamined until morning. You do not know how it grows. That is not a gap in your education. It is the design. Nobody knows how it grows. The farmer in the story did not know, and he had done it every year of his life, and the not knowing did not stop the harvest arriving. Notice how much energy goes into pretending you know how it grows. The rehearsal of the conversation is that pretending. The forecasting of the outcome is that pretending. Each lap is an attempt to see under the soil, and the soil does not open, and the mind takes the closed soil as a sign to try again. It will not open tonight. It is not supposed to. There is peace in a thing that is genuinely out of your hands, not a resigned peace, a restful one, because a burden that was never yours cannot be dropped by you. You cannot drop this. That is the good news. It is not being held up by your grip. Feel your body settle a little further into the bed. Feel how much of you is already being held by the mattress and by the ground under the house and by everything under that. You are not holding yourself up either. You never have been. The blanket is warm. The room is dark. The field outside is doing everything it needs to do without a lamp. Somewhere down in the soil, something small is opening, quietly, in the dark, exactly as it should. That is grace. It grows while you are not looking, and it does not require you to understand it. Sleep and rise night and day. The rest of it is not your department. You are held, and the field is held, and neither of you is being watched by the other. Let the ground work. You lie still. There is a psalm that almost everyone has heard, and most people have heard it in the wrong room. They have heard it at funerals in a heavy voice, with everybody standing up, so it arrives sounding solemn and a little far away and hard to lie down inside of. Let us take it out of that room and put it back where it started, which is on a hillside at the end of a day, with animals and dust and the smell of grass, because it was written by someone who had actually done the work, not a poet imagining a shepherd, a man who had spent nights out there, who knew what the ground felt like at 2 in the morning and what a flock sounds like when it finally settles. Consider the day that comes before the psalm. Sheep are led out in the morning. They are not driven from behind. That is a real detail, and it matters. The shepherd walks in front and they follow, and the whole day is spent moving from one bit of grass to another, slowly, at the speed of the slowest animal. There is nothing efficient about it. Nobody is hurrying. The pace of that work is the pace of eating. He knows where the water is. That is his knowledge, not theirs. They have no idea where the water is, and no need to have any idea, because he does. And the water he takes them to is still water. Not because still water is prettier, but because a sheep will not drink from moving water. They will stand at the edge of a rushing stream, thirsty, and refuse. Think about the sound of that. A few stones moved in a channel, water finding a new shape. 10 minutes of quiet work by one person so that 100 animals can drink. Most of the care in the world looks like that, small, unwitnessed, done ahead of time. So he finds a pool. Or dams a small channel with stones to make one, and the surface goes flat, and then they drink. Notice all the work in that. The stillness is made for them. Someone built the quiet. That is a strange and tender thing to sit with tonight. The quiet you are trying to find is not something you have to manufacture out of your own effort. Someone has been making still places for a very long time, and one of them is this hour. Then the psalm says something that people repeat without hearing. He makes me lie down. Not he suggests that I rest, not he allows me to rest if my work is finished. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Anyone who has been around sheep will tell you they do not lie down easily. They will not lie down if they are hungry or thirsty or afraid or if something is irritating them. Lying down is the last thing a sheep does, and it only does it when all 4 of those are handled. So the sentence is not about compulsion. It is about a shepherd who has quietly removed every reason to stay standing. Fed, watered, nothing threatening, nothing biting. Then the animal folds its legs and goes down into the grass, and the whole flock does the same across the hillside, and the hill goes silent. Think about the animals for a second. They are not brave. They are among the least capable creatures on that hillside. They cannot defend themselves, and they are not clever. And they sleep out in the open, in a country with real dangers in it, every single night. They can do that for exactly one reason, and the reason is sitting up against a rock. You are held for the same reason, not because you are capable, because someone is up. Feel that hillside for a moment. Feel that hillside for a moment. It is evening. The light is low and yellow and coming sideways through the grass, and every blade has a shadow twice its length. The ground is still warm from the afternoon. There is a sound of animals settling, that heavy, contented, resigned sound that a body makes when it stops holding itself up. And there is one man awake on that hill, sitting slightly above them, with his back against a rock and his stick across his knees. He will be awake for a good part of the night. That is the job. He is not resentful about it, and he is not dramatic about it. He is simply the one who stays awake so that 80 animals do not have to. That is the whole picture, and you can lie down inside it. You have been trying to be the shepherd and the sheep at the same time. That is the exhausting arrangement. You graze and you also patrol. You lie down and you also keep watch. No wonder you cannot sleep. You are not the one on the rock tonight. Notice how much of your effort has gone into a job that is already staffed. Stay on the hill a little longer. The stars over that country are extraordinary. There is nothing between the ground and the sky, and no light anywhere, so the whole band of them comes out thick and low. A man sitting up against a rock would have watched them move across the whole night. Not quickly. You cannot see them move. You can only see that they have moved when you look up again after a while. That is how the night passes for someone who is keeping watch. In long, unhurried stretches, marked by the position of things overhead. He would not have been bored. That is a modern idea. He would have been doing what people do on a long watch, which is thinking slowly, in loops that do not require an answer. And somewhere in those loops, a sentence formed that people are still repeating 3,000 years later. The psalm was not written at a desk. It was written on that hill, or somewhere like it, by a man who was tired and awake and not unhappy about being either. There is peace in a night watch that belongs to someone else. You are not on it. You get to be one of the sleeping ones down in the grass. Then the psalm walks through the dark part. And it does not pretend the dark part is not there. It says, "Even in the valley of deep shadow, I will fear nothing, because you are with me." Notice what is not promised. It does not say the valley will be skipped. It does not say the road will go around it. It says, "with me." That is all it offers, and it turns out to be enough for 3,000 years of frightened people. Your valley tonight may be small, a worry about money, a worry about a person, the low gray dread that has no name and shows up around 1 in the morning. Or it may not be small at all. Some people listening tonight are in a real one. Either way, the offer is the same, and it is not a solution, it is company. You are not walking through it by yourself, and you do not have to see the end of it before you close your eyes. And then the psalm ends with a table set in an odd place, and a cup that is too full, and the promise that goodness and mercy will follow behind you, coming along after you all your days, whether or not you turn around and check. You do not have to check. That is the point of the word follow. One more small thing before the water. Sheep do not lie down all at once. They go down in ones and twos over half an hour as each one finishes what it is doing. Nobody makes them hurry. The hill just gradually gets quieter until it is quiet. That is how sleep will come tonight, not at a moment, over a stretch. One part of you at a time letting go, while the rest is still finishing. You are already partway down. Some of you has already stopped. Let the rest follow at its own speed. So let the hillside go dark. Think about the smell of that hill. Dry grass, warm earth, wool, a little smoke from somewhere far off. Nothing sharp, nothing that would wake anyone. Feel the grass. Feel the grass. Feel the warmth going out of the ground slowly. Feel the whole flock down around you, breathing. None of them worried, none of them watching. The water was found today. The green place was found today. The frightening thing at the edge of the field was dealt with hours ago, and nobody woke you for it. There is peace on that hill, and it is not your peace. It belongs to the one sitting up against the rock, and he shares it out simply by staying. He makes me lie down. That is not a demand. That is the kindest sentence in the psalm. You are being made to lie down, fed, watered, unafraid, with nothing left to handle. Rest here. Someone is awake on the rock above you, and he will be there all night. You are held on the hillside, and the hillside is dark, and that is exactly how it should be. There was once a woman in England, 600 years ago, who lived in a small room built onto the side of a church in a busy town. That is a strange sentence to modern ears, so let it settle slowly. The room was not large. It had a window onto the street so that people could come and speak to her, and a window into the church so that she could hear what was happening inside. She lived there for many years and did not travel. The town outside was not gentle. It was a hard century in that part of the world. Sickness came through more than once and took a great many people. She would have known this. The street outside her window was not an abstraction to her. And she herself had been very ill when she was young. Ill enough that the people around her expected her to die and made the arrangements that people made. She did not die. She recovered slowly, and afterward, she spent the rest of her life turning over what she had understood while she was lying there. That is the whole biography, and it is almost nothing. She wrote one book. She had one sentence in it that has outlived everything else. All shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Notice who is saying it. That is not the sentence of a comfortable person. It is not the sentence of someone who has been protected from anything. It comes out of a small room in a plague century from a woman who had already been laid out for death once. She was not being cheerful. Cheerfulness is what people do when they have not looked. She had looked, and this is what she came back with. Consider how that sentence works, because it is built very carefully. It does not say, all is well. That would be false, and she was not a liar. Things were not well in that town in that year. It says all shall be well. It puts the wellness at the end. It leaves room for the middle to be difficult. It does not require you to pretend about today. Consider how long that sentence has been traveling. 6 centuries, through wars and languages and centuries that thought they had no use for it, and it is being said tonight in a dark room to you. Something in it has kept it alive that long. And then it says the thing that makes it enormous. And then it says the thing that makes it enormous, all manner of thing. Not the important things, not the big things that would make a satisfying story, all manner of thing, the small, ridiculous, embarrassing things, the thing you said in 2019, the thing you did not say, the relationship that ended badly, the mess in the kitchen, the email. All manner of things shall be well. That is a strange promise, and she never explained it, and she did not try to prove it. She simply reported it the way you would report the weather. Consider how she spent her days in that room. Slowly, that is the only honest answer. There was very little to do. People came to the window and told her their troubles, and she listened and said something short, and then they went away and the street went on. Hours of quiet in between, a whole life made of hours of quiet. We are frightened of that now. We fill every gap, and then we lie down at night and find that the gaps have all been saved up and are waiting for us in a pile. Let some of the pile be spent here, in the dark, doing nothing. That is what it is for. Now, what is this for at 1 in the morning? Now, what is this for at 1 in the morning? It is for the specific shape of the thoughts that are keeping you awake. Notice their grammar. Almost all of them are trying to answer a question that begins with, what if? What if it does not work out? What if they are angry? What if the money does not come? What if I have made a mistake I cannot undo? What if this is how it stays? Every one of those is a small door opening onto a dark room, and the mind walks into each one and turns on no light and stands there. You cannot close those doors by arguing. You have tried. Each argument produces a counter-argument, and the counter-argument produces another door. What her sentence does is different. It does not close the doors. It puts a floor under all the rooms. You do not have to know how it turns out. You only have to consider the possibility that the ending is not in your hands and is not in the end against you. That is all she is offering. It is quite small. It has kept a great many people alive. Consider how little she had to work with. No travel, no library to speak of, one window onto a street and one onto a church. She could not go anywhere, and the century she lived in was doing terrible things outside her wall, and she had one long illness behind her and no guarantee about anything ahead. Out of that, a sentence that has outlasted the town, the century, and the language it was written in. That is worth resting on. Enormous things have come out of very small rooms, from people who had almost nothing on ordinary evenings. You are in a small room tonight with almost nothing available to you. You cannot fix anything from here. You cannot make a call. You cannot go anywhere. That is not a wasted position. It has never been a wasted position. Some of the steadiest people who have ever lived did their best work lying still with the door shut. There is peace in a small room. It is one of the few places where the size of the world finally matches the size of what you can do about it. Tonight the world is this room. That is all it is. And in this room there is nothing left to be done. Feel her room for a moment, because it is a good room to fall asleep in. Feel her room for a moment, because it is a good room to fall asleep in. Stone walls, thick, cool in summer and cold in winter, a narrow bed, a table, a candle probably, and the light of it moving on the stone. Through one window, the sounds of the street, going quiet as the evening comes on. A cart, a dog, somebody calling somebody home. Through the other window, the great dark space of the church, empty and enormous, with its own particular silence, the kind that has weight to it. And a woman sitting in the middle of all that, with almost nothing, having decided that the whole thing holds. She was not certain because she could see the plan. She was certain because of something she had felt in the worst week of her life, which was that she was held. That word again, held. She used a picture for it that people have carried ever since. She said she was shown something small, no bigger than a hazelnut, lying in the palm of a hand, and she wondered what it was, and she understood that it was everything that is made. The whole world, small enough to hold, and lasting because it is loved. Notice the scale change in that image, and how much it lowers the temperature. The thing you are worrying about is inside that hazelnut. So are you. So is the person you are worried about, and the money, and the job, and the whole street outside her window, and the century. None of it is being held by you. There is a particular relief in being small. Modern life will not let you feel it. Everything is arranged to make you feel responsible for outcomes far past the reach of your hands. You are not that large. That is not an insult, and it is not a failure. It is a rest. You are a small thing in a large hand, and the hand has been steady for a very long time. So let the sentence be the last thing you argue with tonight. All shall be well. You do not have to believe it. You only have to let it be said over you, the way a blanket is put over someone who has fallen asleep in a chair. and all manner of things shall be well. Not solved, not explained, well. Say it once, slowly, and then let it go. And if it comes back around later in the night, let it come. That is peace, and it is not the peace of a settled situation. It is the peace of a settled ending. You are held in a small room in a hard century, and the woman who lived there is telling you, across 600 years, that the thing you are afraid of is inside the hand too. Rest now. It is all in there. It is all being kept. There is one more picture, and it is the smallest one, and then we will let the night be quiet. Think of a river running past a sleeping town. Not a large river, the kind that a town grows up beside, with a stone bridge over it, and houses backing onto it, and a path along one bank that people walk in the afternoon. At this hour, there is nobody on the path. The houses are dark, the bridge is empty, and the river goes on. Notice that. It goes on. It has been going on all evening, through the part where people were still awake, and it will go on through the whole night, and nobody will watch it do it. That is the first thing about a river. It does not need an audience. Now consider what falls into a river in the course of a night. Leaves, mostly. A great many leaves, small branches, whatever the wind puts in, something from the bank giving way, a feather. None of it stays. That is the second thing about a river, and it is the whole picture. The river does not sort what comes into it. It does not decide that this leaf is important and that one is not. It does not hold anything back for further consideration. Everything that lands on it goes downstream. Your thoughts are leaves on this water. That is where we started tonight, out in the desert with birds crossing a sky. It is the same teaching in a wetter country. A thought arrives. It lands on the surface. You notice it. And then it moves. It moves because that is what the surface is doing. And it will keep moving as long as you do not reach in and hold it in place. Notice that reaching in is the only work available to you here. It is the only way to stop a leaf. You have to put your hand in the cold water and hold it against the current, and the current keeps pulling, and your arm gets tired. That is what tonight has been. An arm in cold water, holding one leaf still. Think about how cold that water is. River water at night is colder than you expect, even in summer. It takes the warmth out of a hand in under a minute. That is a good picture of what holding a thought all night does to you. It is not just tiring, it cools you. People who cannot sleep get a particular kind of chill in them. It is not the room, it is the holding. Warmth comes back the moment the hand comes out. Take your hand out of the river. Take your hand out of the river. The leaf will go. It will turn once and slide under the bridge and be gone around the bend where the willow is, and you will not be able to find it again if you want it. Let it go around the bend. And here is the next one, and it will do the same thing, and so will the one after that. You do not have to count them. Counting is another hand in the water. There is one more thing about rivers worth taking into sleep. They are quietest in the middle. At the banks, the water catches on stones and roots and makes all its sound. Out in the middle, it moves fastest and says the least. A leaf that reaches the middle stops turning. It just travels. Most of your thoughts tonight have been caught at the bank, spinning in the same small eddy behind the same stone, going nowhere, and making a great deal of noise about it. Let them out into the middle, not by pushing, by letting go of the stone. There is peace in the middle of a river, and it is a moving peace. not a still one. Nothing there is resolved. Everything there is simply on its way. Your life is on its way tonight, and you are not steering it, and it is not lost. Feel the town around this river. Feel the town around this river. Slate roofs, wet with dew, chimneys cold, a single lamp somewhere at the far end of a street doing its small job for nobody, curtains drawn on every window. Everybody in that town is asleep. All of them had a day. Several of them had a hard one. One of them lay awake for a while and then went under without noticing. And the river went on under all of it, carrying away everything the day had dropped in. There is something in the older writings about the Lord doing away with what is behind us, casting it into the depths of the sea, remembering it no more. Notice the direction of that, away, downstream, not filed, not stored somewhere to be reviewed later. Away into deep water where nobody goes looking. You have been going looking. That is what the fourth lap around the same thought is. It is a person wading back upstream in the dark, trying to find a leaf that was already carried off, because they are not quite sure they were allowed to let it go. You were allowed. You are allowed now. So stand on the bank, or better, lie down on the bank in the grass, with the sound of it going by beside you. Think about the stones under the water. They have been there longer than the town. The river has been moving over them for so long that they have gone smooth and round, and it took no effort at all from either of them. Water wore the stone by simply continuing. Nothing you are trying to force tonight is going to be solved by force. It is going to be worn smooth over years, quietly, while you sleep. That sound is very old and very even. That sound is very old and very even. It has no beginning inside it and no end. It does not build to anything. It is just water moving over stones, over and over, saying the same thing all night. It is one of the few sounds that a tired mind cannot argue with. Think of how far downstream a leaf gets in an hour. Further than you would guess, past the mill, past the last houses, out into the fields where nobody is. By morning, it is somewhere you will never see, in water that has already forgotten it. That is where tonight's thoughts are going, all of them, even the heavy one. There is peace in a current that does not stop when you sleep. Let each thought that comes now be a leaf on that water. Let each thought that comes now be a leaf on that water. There is one. Notice it. Let it move. There is another. Let it move. There is a long gap of nothing at all, just the sound of the water, and then perhaps another one, smaller, hardly worth the name. Let it move. Your breathing has already slowed. It did that while you were listening to the water, without being asked, which is how all the good things happen. The river is doing the carrying. It has been doing it since long before you were born, and it will do it long after this week is forgotten. You do not have to help. That is grace. It carries what you set down, and it does not bring any of it back. The town is asleep. The bridge is empty. The water is going under it in the dark, taking the whole day with it, quietly, without being watched. You are held on the bank, and the leaves are going, and the sound goes on. Let the water have them. Let it have all of them. Rest now. You do not need to remember everything you heard tonight. If one moment stayed with you, let that be enough. And if nothing stayed, that is fine too. Some things settle into us without our knowing. If you are still with us, thank you for staying. If you have already drifted off, thank you for that too. Wherever you are right now, You are welcome here, exactly as you are. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Chapel.